This is Cameron Collins of Unincarcerated Productions, and you're listening to Justice Delayed.
You decide what you want to be when you grow up.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of Justice Delayed. This episode, we're going to do things a little bit differently than we did in Season 1. Instead of an interview like you've come to expect from Billy and Jody, we will be telling the tale of Billy's release from prison and how he was aided by Rafael Goyeneche and the New Orleans Metropolitan Crime Commission. Here's Billy and Jody with that story.
Hi, I'm Jody Sinclair, and I have a question for you. Have you ever, in your wildest imagination, thought you'd end up wearing a wire for the FBI? Me either, but I did in Louisiana's infamous pardons for sale scam in 1986. My husband, Billy Sinclair, blew the whistle on a scam that let prisoners pay bribes to get out of prison in Louisiana. Billy knew I had the $15,000 the prison official asked for to free him. He never asked me for the money. And he never asked the federal or state authorities for anything in return for his cooperation when he met with them. In the end, the state's pardon board chairman was convicted of selling pardons, and so was the prison official who asked Billy for that $15,000. Months before those convictions, a former New Orleans prosecutor got wind of the scam. By then, Rafael Goyeneche was with the New Orleans Metropolitan Crime Commission, a powerful, conservative, public anti-crime organization with retired law enforcement officers on its board of directors. He called Ray LaMonica, the federal prosecutor in charge of the case, to check the facts.
Right after I joined the Crime Commission, there started to be some stories about paroles being awarded not on the basis of merit, but based on bribery. Parole applicants could pay off some of the members of the parole board, particularly the chairman of the parole board, and he would line up the votes and secure the parole. Billy told me, and some other people made claims that Billy was one of the whistleblowers in the pardon for sale scandal. So that's great that he claimed that, but as a prosecutor, I'm looking for more proof than that. So I called up the prosecutor that was in charge of investigating that, a gentleman by the name of Ray LaMonica, who had a very respected reputation in Louisiana, long-time, hard-nosed prosecutor. And I said, Mr. LaMonica, I'd like to talk to you about Billy Sinclair and the role that he played in the investigation that you've been conducting involving the pardon for sale investigation. And he said, I'll talk to you about that. He's the real deal. And he told me things about that case and what Billy did that hadn't been written about in the media. And I said, I'd like to bring this information to my board of directors. He said, please do. I asked, did Billy predicate his cooperation on any promises or guarantees from the federal government, saying that the federal government, in exchange for his cooperation, would take a stance supporting his pardon or parole? Or did they promise him anything in return for his cooperation? And he said, absolutely not. We made no promises. In fact, we told him that there may be some repercussions for him cooperating, and Billy still cooperated. In fact, doing it with knowledge that it actually may be detrimental or adverse to his chances for a pardon or parole.
It also could have cost Billy his life. At the time, an extremely dangerous inmate, Kirksey McCord Nix, was raising money through an outside scam to buy his way out of prison. He was reputed to head up the Dixie Mafia, a violent gang known throughout the South. Billy had snitched on the scam Nix counted on to get himself out of prison once he'd raised enough money. Snitching in prison, telling on another inmate, can get you killed.
In 1986, I was co-editor of The Angelite, the only uncensored prison publication in the United States written by inmates. It was winning national awards. In that capacity as co-editor, I had heard through the prison grapevine that the pardon board chairman was taking bribes. I had no proof, but I had strong suspicion. Then a prison official took me aside. He told me, quite frankly, and in some detail, that he could get me out of prison for $15,000. When Jody visited me several days later, we talked about it. I conveyed to her everything that the prison official told me. She decided that she would contact her cousin, a powerful Republican congressman, who would be able to put her in contact with the FBI. Jody wore a wire for the FBI and met with the prison official who had made the offer to me. When the stories about this scam broke in the news media, some 3 months later, 2 inmates with the Angelite, both of whom I knew real well, both of these inmates told me, "You're a dead man." That night, an inmate was transferred from a Supermax unit into the dormitory in which I was housed. I lived in a trustee dormitory. No inmate in Supermax could be transferred legitimately to a trustee dormitory. It did not happen. It had never happened. I suspected then, and I still believe today, that this inmate, who had a long history of violence, who had killed 2 other inmates during his incarceration, was placed in my dorm to kill me. I stayed awake that night. I watched him, he watched me. I knew that he was waiting because he wanted to get a lay of the land in the dormitory, what the rituals were, what the human traffic was in the dormitory. He wanted to understand all the details before he moved. I did not wait for him to make his move. The next morning, at around 6:30, I called Jody. She immediately called Ray LaMonica, the U.S. attorney who was handling the pardon selling scheme. She told him about the imminent threat. He immediately sent 2 U.S. Marshals to the prison to take me into protective custody, and that's how I left the prison.
Rafael Goyeneche never expected a Louisiana inmate to report corruption, much less a prisoner whose only way out of prison was to pay a bribe. Billy was 20 years old when he shot a grocery store clerk who was chasing him across a parking lot in the dark after Billy tried to hold up the store. Billy fired an unaimed bullet over his shoulder as he ran to scare the guy. The clerk was holding a broom over his head. The bullet hit the clerk in the left armpit and he bled to death. Billy was convicted of felony murder by a corrupt prosecutor who suppressed 4 witnesses who saw what happened, turning a manslaughter case into felony murder. Would the Metropolitan Crime Commission ever consider supporting a parole for Billy? In the end, it did.
Billy Sinclair was a whistleblower exposing corruption at the state level, allowing people out of the penitentiary that really haven't been reformed. They were continuing their criminal conduct, and they were willing to do that, and they were paying the public officials to get out, and that's not what the Crime Commission stands for.
If it was not for the Metropolitan Crime Commission, I believe I would have died an old man in prison. I mean, even before the Metropolitan Crime Commission got involved in my case and endorsed my freedom efforts, I had established a credible record of individual rehabilitation. From 1978 to 1982, myself and the other co-editor of The Angelite traveled around the state on speaking engagements. We talked to universities, to high schools, to civic groups, even to kindergarten classes about the dangers and the pitfalls of criminal activity. We were the examples of what not to do, the examples of what 2 individuals could do to change their life. So the record of rehabilitation was there because that's how much trust the prison administration placed in me. to let me go around the state with one guard, unarmed, on speaking engagements that sometimes lasted overnight. In 1988, Louisiana elected a reform governor, a former congressman named Buddy Roemer. When Roemer became governor, he appointed a pardon board that consisted primarily of professionals, people who had expertise in criminal justice. I did not know what to expect from Roemer's pardon board, but I knew I had to make every effort to present as much information to that board as I could about my rehabilitation. I reached out to the Metropolitan Crime Commission, and after an exhaustive investigation, the Commissioner's Board of Directors decided to endorse my release. They took a vote. It was unanimous. It really stunned me that the group would come to my aid and would lend support to my freedom effort. In 1990, Roemer's Pardon Board recommended that my life sentence be commuted to 75 years. That 75 years commutation, if signed, would make me parole-eligible. In 1991, Rafael Goyeneche, along with my attorney, Jack Martzell, and 2 state legislators, went to the governor's office. They personally met with the governor. They laid out all the reasons why the governor should sign that 75-year recommendation, why the MCC had decided to endorse me and would continue to endorse me. It was a remarkable effort, an even more remarkable visit. In 1992, the day before he left office, Buddy Roemer signed my clemency recommendation. He increased the 75-year recommendation to 90 years, but I was still parole eligible on that 90-year recommendation, immediately eligible.
Over the next 9 years, Billy had 6 parole hearings. He was denied each time. In 2006, Louisiana had another reform governor, Kathleen Blanco. The Metropolitan Crime Commission again urged the parole board to parole Billy as it had during those 9 years. The board voted unanimously to parole Billy at a Friday hearing. On Monday afternoon, I picked Billy up and drove him home to Texas after his more than 40 years in prison.
Both Governor Roemer and Governor Blanco did not tolerate corruption or political interference in their pardon and parole boards, not under their watch. They wanted a drama-free, a corruption-free decision-making process that was free of any kind of taint of scandal. And both boards did exactly that. During each board's 4-year tenure, there was never a hint of corruption, never a hint of scandal. I will forever, and when I say that, I mean forever, be truly grateful that the Metropolitan Crime Commission was able to reach Buddy Roemer's pardon board and able to reach Governor Blanco's parole board, both of whom set into motion my April 2006 parole release.
Political factors were taking precedence over the merits of whether Billy deserved parole. When you look at the people that have been and were paroled, and you compare what their record was while in custody versus Billy Wayne Sinclair's, there was literally no comparison. And the only explanation that you can offer is that he was made an example of because of the person that he murdered as a 19-year-old who was, a member of a football team in Baton Rouge that won a state championship. One of their teammates went on to LSU and won the Heisman Trophy. And the fact that, the political powers that be wanted to make an example of Billy Sinclair. The only reason that he continued to be held as an inmate was because of the politics that ignored and overlooked all of his accomplishments and the merit of him being released.
The New Orleans Metropolitan Crime Commission stood by its endorsement of Billy's parole for 18 years. And it's no wonder. For 70 years, it's been fighting corruption. It's a private, nonprofit organization that was founded by the New Orleans business community in 1952 to fight street crime. Businessmen knew that crime and corruption were disincentives to growth. They knew Louisiana had a reputation of corruption and misconduct, and they wanted a way to reform it. They created an organization like the Crime Commission in Chicago. And then they reformed the New Orleans Police Department, getting rid of corrupt police officers who were aiding and abetting street crime. They wanted an end to corrupt politicians taking money to pass legislation that favored people who paid the bribe so they could get ahead in business.
Just since 2009, there have been 98 public corruption convictions that were obtained, that were initiated by the Metropolitan Crime Commission and referred to federal and state law enforcement agencies. Every one of those 98 cases started with somebody picking up the phone or coming in to see us and giving us the information. And when we get that tip, we don't just call up law enforcement and say, our source told us that so-and-so is doing this. We write a report. We include supporting documentation, names of witnesses that can corroborate the information. And when we make that handoff, the people that are going to investigate now have a blueprint of how they need to proceed. My investigators know how to put together a public corruption case. So when we give that report to the FBI and they're getting other information and they see that what we've given them, they're going to usually move our referral to the top of their to-do list. And that's how there have been 98 public corruption investigations that have resulted in convictions that were handed off by the Metropolitan Crime Commission. And I'm not just talking about within the city of New Orleans. We've seen public officials from multiple parishes, ranging from law enforcement, sheriffs, parish presidents, mayors, judges, all held accountable because the public reports it.
When Billy turned down the opportunity to buy his way out of prison, even though he knew there was little chance he would ever be free, I couldn't have asked for more proof that I was married to an honest, decent man. Billy is an example that people can change, especially those who commit crimes at very young ages. And I will always be grateful that Rafael Goyeneche, the president of the New Orleans Metropolitan Crime Commission, and his board of directors recognized and deeply appreciated Billy's honesty.
He led by example. He exposed corruption. He was rehab before there were really extensive programs available to him. It was self-help. And he really became, I think, the poster child in Louisiana for inmates. He turned his life around, and it opened my eyes, it opened the board of directors' eyes of the Crime Commission. And I think that the people on the parole board and everybody in law enforcement that looked into it came to that conclusion too. The only reason that he continued to be held as an inmate was because of the politics that ignored and overlooked all of his accomplishments and the merit of him being released. I think that he has been a pioneer, not just as a whistleblower, but as a message of redemption. He led by example.
All of us at Unincarcerated Productions, as well as the Sinclairs, would like to give a sincere thank you to Rafael Goyeneche and the New Orleans Metropolitan Crime Commission. Justice Delayed is a joint production of Unincarcerated and Grindle Industries. This show was edited by Cameron Collins. The script was put together by Jody Sinclair. All music you heard on this episode was from Speculation. To hear more from Spec, visit speculation.bandcamp.com. For more information about what we do, visit unincarcerated.com. See you next time.